This is an unofficial fan-made audiobook. All original stories are owned by Wizards of the Coast. If you are enjoying these stories, please consider subscribing to my Patreon over at patreon.com/voxoraculum for some special patron-exclusive content. Thanks. On with the story. Tarkir Dragonstorm. Side story. Jeskai. The Unknown Way. The piercing cry of the sparrowhawk rang out as it winged its way over the crimson peaks of Cory Mountain. Soft feathers and sharp wings carved through the sea of clouds, a confident brushstroke against the grey-white canvas. Below, blurs of brown and green streaked by, rice fields melting into villages till they shifted into the striking, vibrant oranges and reds of the Cory Mountain Monastery. Tall pagodas soared skyward, extending the reach of the already towering stone spires and mountain tops. The hawk cried out again as it flew over the monastery grounds, letting out a squawk as it dodged an ascending shrine-keeper dragon. As it continued its journey, the expansive human architecture beneath it gave way to the natural formations of the caldera beyond. Obsidian stone of cooled lava flows jutted out in magnificent arcs against the crystal blue waters of the caldera lake, shimmering reflections dancing in the afternoon light. Suddenly, the hawk dove with a screech, eyes and talons fixed on the promise of a meal. As it descended, it barely missed the human seated in a lotus pose atop one of the obsidian formations. So still was his meditation, so steady his breath, that the hawk did not detect him at all. The man did not react at all to the shriek of the hawk, nor did he react to the splash of water below him, nor the sound of squirming scales, nor the gasping struggle and ending of a life. Unperturbed, Asham's breath continued at a steady pace, the sounds of the natural world fading away as he further centered his focus inward. Breath blows in. Asham's eyelids fluttered as his chest expanded, the coarse fabric of his robes chafing slightly against his skin. A single bead of sweat dripped across his brow, completing its long journey across his shaven head to linger just at the corner of his eye. Still, Asham ignored it. Air through the lungs, mana through the second gate. In one fluid motion, Asham left his meditative stance, uncoiling with a dragon-inspired grace. His center of mass smoothly shifted as he spun onto his feet, body spiraling with a practiced rhythm. Limbs glide as claws rend the air. Asham tensed his hands into a talon-like shape, the momentum from the spiral now extending into languid arcs through his outstretched arms, the steps of the form embedded deep into his muscle memory. Release the self, expel breath, and conjure flames. Asham's eyes flew open as he let out a loud "Ha!" His arms, thrust out with force, tensed talon-stance hands treading through air. His execution of the physical form was perfect, but no flames manifested. With a frustrated huff, Asham resumed his sitting meditation. He could feel the mana dissipate like sweat from his body, without even the faintest spark of the mystic fires that the form was supposed to unlock. Again, Asham inhaled through his nose. Breath flows in. He tried to focus, to empty his thoughts. But in his mind he saw her face. Air through the lungs. The stupid grin of that Timur clan fighter, her very presence an insult to the Jeskai temple she visited. Mana through the second gate. The challenge she issued against the monastery echoed in Asham's memory. "Call forth your most promising disciple," she said. Limbs glide. His pride in being chosen by the elders, his eagerness to humble the arrogant wanderer. His claws rend the air. The entire monastery watching, the anticipation crackling in the courtyard, the respect of his fellow disciples, the honor of Cory Mountain, all at stake as he circled the fighter. Release the self. Expel breath. The fight, all over in a single strike. But not the way it was supposed to end. Conjure flames. Asham on his back, dazed, staring at the blue sky and wondering why the clouds churned with such dizzying patterns. Conjure flames. Silence, save the ringing in his ears. He had failed. He was a failure. Conjure flames! The fresh memory collided with his present, as Asham found himself flapping his hands helplessly while the momentum of his over-eager, scorching talon strike carried him off balance. For a moment, he thought he could recover, but his centre of mass tipped ever so slightly over his toes, and down he went, tumbling to the blue waters below, landing on his belly with a stinging splash. Asham scrambled in an undignified paddle within the icy blue, gasping for air as he breached the surface of the lake. Nice one, Asham! Asham whirled his head around, embarrassment rising in his cheeks, only to be overwhelmed by relief at the sight of the grinning face greeting him from the shore. Roo! Asham gave a powerful kick, cresting the surface of the water with a front flip and landing on his feet. His cloth shoes slid over the surface of the water as he found his balance. With gentle ease, Asham channeled mana to his legs, bounding lightly across the surface of the lake, and leaping to catch his Einok friend in a warm embrace. Roo laughed, shoving Asham off him. Still making the cloud step technique look easy, huh? Asham shook his head. Says the fastest kid in the village, you make my cloud step look like some kind of lead foot stance. Roo shrugged, good-natured. A memory clearly distorted by nostalgia and humility. Only one of us is now an esteemed monk of the Kori Mountain Monastery, after all. Asham groaned. I don't want to talk about it. About what? Exactly. Asham cast his gaze about, looking to change the subject. What brings you all the way up to the lake? The family ox needs some water, Roo answered matter-of-factly. Pai needs water. Asham looked further down the bank, where, indeed, an ox stood. Pai passed last winter. That's Guai. Asham paused. I'm sorry. A few years in the monastery and he forgets how farm life works, Roo teased. Seasons pass, animals die. It's how things go. Asham rolled his eyes and started wringing out the sleeves of his soaked robe. I know you though, Roo. Probably bawled your eyes out for 3 nights. Oh yes, definitely, Roo replied. Pai meant the world to me. Asham shook his head. You know, there's easier watering holes closer to the village to take your ox to. Less treacherous paths, too. Roo shrugged. Yes, he said. I suppose there are. The two stood quietly for a moment, gazing out across the lake, their thoughts broken up by the sound of loud lapping coming from the nearby ox. How are things? Back in the village? Asham tried to keep his question nonchalant. Quite well, Roo replied, one paw scratching behind a pointed ear. Your parents send their regards. They told me that if I ran into you, I should tell you that they're very proud of you. I wish they wouldn't, Asham complained. I really don't need any more pressure right now. Oh no, I have such supportive parents. My life is so difficult, Roo teased. His playful banter faltered as he saw the sullen look on his friend's face. Hey, what's bothering you? Asham turned and started walking back toward his meditation perch. Nothing. Your brow is a storm cloud of worry, my friend, Roo called out after him. And even the lake water can't mask the scent of stress in the air. Sharp nose on a dense dog, Asham grumbled. Thorny words from a drenched monk, Roo retorted. Asham glowered at his friend. Roo returned his look, arms crossed. Slowly, The frown on Asham's face turned into a mischievous grin. Oh, you think you're better than me simply because you're dry? Rue's answer was a splash of water in Asham's face. Asham sputtered and ran to give chase, but Rue took full advantage of his head start, feet alighting across the lake like a dancing dragonfly, leaving perfect ripples expanding out with each step as he bounded across the water. Try as Asham would, he couldn't catch his friend or land a good splash. Every time he got close, the Einok managed to dash and dart out of the way, returning with graceful jets of water that always seemed to find their mark. You're cheating! Asham laughed as he got splashed yet again. No, I'm just winning, Rue called out as he ducked behind an obsidian outcropping. As Asham's gaze traced along the formation, an idea came to mind. He plunged his hand into the water, expending mana to conjure a swirl of air around his open palm. The accelerating winds drew water toward him into a swirling cyclone. Asham quickly scaled up the stone outcropping above him, trailing a typhoon of water in his wake. From the top, he saw Rue standing on the surface of the water, peering ever so carefully around the edge of the pillar below him. None the wiser. With a grunt, Asham pulled the Zephyr Strike before him, the spiraling air drawing up and dumping an entire surge of water down on Rue. Gotcha! Asham shouted as the deluge came crashing down. A surprised yelp, a crash of water. Asham grinned, pleased at his triumph. The grin slowly decayed, as the lapping water showed no signs of Rue. Asham rushed and stumbled down the stone outcropping, pebbles and stones skittering behind him. Rue? Rue? Nothing in sight. No response, save the lapping of disturbed water against the obsidian. Asham stepped out, eyes scanning first the depths, then the horizon, worry rising. Still nothing. Rue? Asham got 2 steps out before a pair of hands emerged from the surface of the lake and grasped Asham around the ankles, pulling him down. Asham let out an undignified scream as he was pulled under for the 2nd time that day. His surprise melted into annoyance, then amusement at the sight of Rue, dark grey fur puffed out underwater, bubbles of laughter escaping from his snout. The two swam up and broke the surface of the water in tandem. Splashes and shouts bounced off the obsidian rocks as the two swam back to shore. Rue clambered onto a flat expanse of stone, Asham right behind him, and the two flopped onto their backs, looking up at the cerulean sky, catching their breaths. Nearby, Guai regarded them with bored eyes, unimpressed. You've gotten faster, Asham said. Are you sure you haven't just slowed down? Rue asked. No, Asham replied, sitting up. Rue waited a moment, panting softly, as Asham stared into the depths of the lake. So? Rue said, after a moment of prolonged silence. Do you want to talk about what has you so moody? Or did you want to evade the topic with more cryptic self-deprecation? I messed up, Asham blurted out. How? I let the whole monastery down. I'm an embarrassment to my fellow disciples, and I dragged the Jeskai name through the dirt. Rue shook his head. That sounds like quite the tale. What actually happened? Sham's story tumbled out of him, a jumble of words and frustration and anger bubbling over. About the Tamul wanderer who passed through Kori Mountain Monastery. About his opportunity to represent his class of disciples in the bout. About the humiliating defeat. Rue listened quietly until his friend ran out of steam. With a sigh, he stood and gave a big stretch and shook out the water all over his body. It sounds to me like you didn't let your whole monastery down, Rue finally said. Were you not listening? And that you're not an embarrassment to your fellow disciples, Rue continued. Asham again started to protest, but Rue held up a hand. It does sound like you are embarrassed in front of your fellow disciples. But there's more to the way than just fighting. Asham scoffed. Sure. But when the way leads you to have a martial arts match with an opposing clan, it's hard to say it's not about fighting. But this was a Timur fighter, a wanderer, yes? And she asked to spar with a disciple of the monastery. Rue shrugged. It sounds like she was interested in an exchange of styles more than in victory or loss. Asham shook his head, frustrated. You didn't hear how she asked. It wasn't for an exchange of ideas. It was clearly because she thought herself superior. Rue cocked his head to one side. Did you not think yourself superior prior to the bout? Confidence in victory is necessary for any fighter, is it not? Asham bounded to his feet and began pacing. Behind him, Guai followed his movements with his eyes. You're twisting my words. I'm only reflecting back what I'm hearing. You're acting so wise for a farm boy too scared to join the monastery. The words hissed out of Asham. Rue sighed and stood to his feet. Ah, we are back to this topic. Asham shook his head, a scowl taking hold of his face. The world has changed, Rue. We witnessed the end of the age of the Dragon Lords. And destiny called us both, and the Kori Mountain elders invited the two of us to study at the monastery. A monastery of free teachings, no longer bound to Ojutai's traditions. But you refused the call. A low growl of frustration rumbled from Rue's chest. You're conflating opportunity with destiny, Asham. He waved a hand further up the mountain, in the direction of the monastery. The monastery was the right choice for you. But the village, and staying with my family, was right for me. We each must find our own way. Yours is as a monk and warrior. Mine is as a farmer. You're far too strong to squander your skills with farming, Asham yelled. Jeskai needs you. Your cloud step technique is faster than that of just about every disciple I've trained with. A skill honed planting rice across our farms, Rue replied. And one that serves that purpose well. Do you really see your parents as living a life squandered? Who do you think grows the food the monasteries eat? Rue thumped a fist on his chest. I am also serving the Jeskai, Asham. The fist softened to an open paw. And I'm just as disappointed that our paths have split. But I believe we are where we need to be. Asham stuttered, his next point derailed. That's not what this is about. Rue sighed. Sure, of course not. Asham kicked a pebble, hard. The two watched it skip across the lake. The elders called me forward as the most skillful disciple. But I let them all down. So I thought if I learned this final martial form, I'd prove myself worthy. Asham moved his arms loosely through the stances. Release the self, expel breath, conjure flames. Only, I can't conjure so much as a spark. He sat, his head drooping in his hands. I know it sounds foolish, but I have to regain my honor. I have to learn this last form. Then, I have to challenge that Timur wrestler to a rematch. I have to win. Rue sat down next to Asham, leaning a comfortable shoulder into the monk's. If one of the steps of the form is to release the self, you sure are saying a lot of I have to's that would contradict that missive, he said. Asham opened his mouth to respond, only to realize he had no great retort. You also mention your honor, but a simple loss is not an erosion of honor or respect, Rue continued. The way says we can lose and still remain honorable. Have your masters conveyed that they felt dishonored by your performance? Or are you doing the things you always do, where you hold yourself to a standard no one else expects? That's not... I don't... Asham stammered. Rue grinned and gave Asham a light headbutt. Ah, so you're doing the thing. Asham sighed and leaned his head on Rue's shoulder. I have missed you, Rue. He half expected Rue to move away, but he didn't. For a moment, Asham just focused on listening to the rise and fall of his friend's breath as the two lingered, the afternoon sun slowly drying out the last dampness from the lake. Finally, Rue stood and turned to Asham, raising his hands into a neutral stance. All right then, he said. Asham blinked. All right, what? Show me this form. Rue beckoned to Asham with a little wave. The one you kept messing up when you fell into the water? Forget about yourself and your duties. Teach me instead. A grin spread across Asham's face as he stepped forward, wrists meeting Rue's, ready to spar. Ai Wen descended the mountain path at a leisurely pace, her step as light as her heart. Her travels had been fruitful, and she had gained much from the Jeskai monks who hosted her the last few days. Though many in her village had warned her of the detached, aloof attitude some Jeskai exuded, she found most of the Jeskai elders she met humble and accommodating. The idea of unity across all clans, nothing more than a naive joke, seemed, well, if not likely, then at least possible. A moon cycle well spent. Ai Wen's good mood only improved as a tree just off the path drew her attention. The most ripe, delicious persimmons dangled from the branches, sun-kissed by the late afternoon light. She plucked one from the bough and took a big bite. A burst of sweetness danced across her tongue as juice ran down her face. Halt! Fighter! Ai Wen turned around. Behind her, she saw a figure silhouetted against the setting sun. She took another big bite of the persimmon, juices spraying, as she glanced around to who else he might be speaking to. You! Timur Wanderer! Ai Wen turned back and squinted at the shadowed figure now pointing in her direction. Oh, me! Hail, fellow traveller! She waved at the figure with her persimmon hand. Then, as an afterthought, care for a persimmon? No, thank you. The figure sounded a little flustered. You sure? They're very sweet, said Ai Wen. She finished the one in hand, then reached up and plucked two more. I can toss you one if you like, or we can eat together if you're headed this way, traveller. I'm not a traveller. And those aren't your persimmons. The figure's voice raised in pitch ever so slightly. They're wild persimmons, are they not? Ai Wen scratched her head, perplexed. Is there a farm nearby? Oh, are they yours? She gave a small bow. My apologies, persimmon farmer. No, they are not. I am not a persimmon farmer. The figure shook his head. Oh, well then, feel free to grab one if you wish. Or not, Ai Wen replied. It is a free Tarkir now, after all. With that, she stowed both persimmons in the pack at her side and turned to resume her descent down the path. A rustle of cloth above her drew her attention upward as the figure catapulted over her, landing lightly on his feet and blocking her path. You shall not escape me! Ha! Impressive! Ai Wen gave an admiring nod at the young man before her. Cloud step technique, yes? She gave him a quick glance over. Bald head, cool robes. You're a Quarry Mountain disciple, right? You guys make the best buns. Nice. Do you not recognize me? The monk before her looked genuinely offended. Ai Wen slapped her forehead. Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry. I've met a lot of monks the last few days. And so many of you have the same shaved head look, so it's been harder to remember faces. But we sparred, the monk said, sullen. I spar with lots of people, Ai Wen responded matter-of-factly. You bested me, the monk said. I best lots of people, Ai Wen responded, even more matter-of-factly. Glad it was memorable for you, though. With that, Ai Wen began descending the mountain once again. An arm shot out, blocking her path forward. Ai Wen arched an eyebrow, tilting her head to look more closely at the rude young monk in her way. He glared back with determination. I am Asham of the Kori Mountain Monastery, and I have tracked you down to demand a rematch. Asham. Iwen's brow furrowed in thought, and burst up. You're the disciple I met on the first day, no? Asham let out a scornful chuckle. So you do remember me. The name was helpful. Iwen shook her head. But I cannot give you a rematch. Why not? Asham said through gritted teeth. Because our bout was not a match, Iwen replied, gently brushing aside Asham's outstretched arm. Asham pulled his hand back into a fist and turned to put his whole body in Iwen's path. You insulted me then, and you insult me now with this refusal. My boy, no insult was intended, Iwen said, her patience waning. And even then, you have little reason to be so bruised and sensitive. Her eyes narrowed. As a respect for your elder's hospitality, I will not take offense at this. Whatever this is. But I kindly implore you to step aside. Iwen stood before her, staring into her eyes. Slowly, he crossed his arms. So, Iwen promptly threw him off the path. With dizzying haste, she thrust one foot behind Asham while twin open palms landed on his chest, giving a firm shove that sent Asham sprawling down the cliffside. She watched to confirm the arc of his fall took him flying backward into the pazoberry bushes below that she saw earlier, landing with a satisfying whoomph. Iwen shook her head as she resumed her walk down the stone path. No need to injure the lad, but honestly, the disrespect. A sudden, rising heat behind her triggered an instinctive sidestep from Iwen. A gout of flame nearly singed the fine fur fringe of her traveller's cloak as she barely dodged out of the way. The Tamur warrior spun around to see Asham standing, hands ablaze, and held out in a talon pose. The glow from the firelight danced across Iwen's armor and flickered in her eyes. Interesting, she said. I will not be denied my rematch, Asham shouted. Asham glided forward, footwork weaving a spiral path as he launched strike after strike. Iwen nimbly dodged out of the way of each blow, but the flames grew larger with each missed swing. The boy has some prowess with this stance, she mused. Asham leapt off the ground, both hands raised above, fiery draconic talons ready to claw down Iwen's body, crying out, I will defeat you! But Iwen was faster. She thrust a single arm up, grasping Asham by the neck, the surprise and force of the aggression knocking the wind out of his body. Then, as though he were little more than a bundle of rags, she brought him smashing down into the stone steps behind her, slamming him into the ground with a crash. Stone and bone alike cracked at the impact. Asham laid on the ground, gasping for air. Broken ribs. Unclear how many. He tried to will himself to stand, but even a simple breath sent another stab of pain shooting through him. Iwen stood to her full height, shaking back her hair that had fallen in front of her face. I am Iwen, elder of the San Ni family of Clan Timur. She shifted her stance, and Asham saw a massive bone and steel sword glimmer at her side. She didn't even use her weapon in either fight. Iwen crouched down, bringing her face close to Asham. I said our bout was no match, not as a jab at your pride or of the Jeskai, but because a fight between an elder and a disciple is no fair match. I merely was curious to study the strength of the Jeskai youth, and you did perfectly fine that day. You... Asham tried to speak, but his breath still only came to him in wheezing rasps. Iwen leaned in closer. What was that? She asked. You can't be that much older than me, Asham managed to squeeze out. But mostly it came out as wheezing breath, with a little burble of... Oh no, was that blood? Iwen laughed heartily.
I will take that compliment, young monk. It takes much to maintain this glowing, healthy skin in the frigid cold of the north, you know.
She stood, looking down at Asham. To his surprise, her expression was not one of anger or even pity, but respect.
Honestly, young monk, pride is your greatest weakness. Clearly, you must have had some sort of martial breakthrough to come at me with that dragonfire stance. An impressive feat for just a few short days.
She looked around, then whispered conspiratorially.
Plus, I expected you to have many more broken bones from that.
Asham felt a reflexive surge of pride, then shame at the utterly crushing compliment. Why was she whispering, as if there was anyone else to hear? And why were there so many black spots dotting his vision?
You're going to be fine, Asham. I leave you in good hands.
With that, Iwen gave a conspiratorial wink and continued down the path. Asham listened to her footsteps recede, trying to peer at her. But even lifting his head was so exhausting, and really, a little rest sounded quite nice. As blackness enveloped him, he almost didn't hear the light patter of cloth shoes approach him. Almost didn't feel an outstretched paw rest gently on his forehead. Asham awoke with a start. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the dark room around him. A familiar scent filled the air, one he couldn't quite place until his sight had adjusted to the dimness. Plum blossom root. Main ingredient in a healing poultice often used in his village. He was home. He shifted a bit and immediately regretted it. His chest ached with a dull soreness that went deep. Beneath him, the familiar, cool bumpiness of a bamboo mat pressed against him. At the foot of the bed, he saw Rue wake with a start from the chair he sat in. The two looked at each other for a moment. Then, they broke out into laughter. I am a fool, Asham said.
Yeah,
Rue agreed.
How did you... You weren't subtle about your intentions on the day you first produced flame with that form.
Rue stood, exchanging the incense at the foot of the bed for a fresh stick. Asham groaned. Master Key must be furious.
I told the monastery you, fell down the mountain,
Rue said.
Over-exuberant training.
Embarrassing, Asham said.
Everyone believed it immediately,
Rue followed up. Even more embarrassing, Asham amended.
Your parents came by to see you, Rue added.
Surprisingly less embarrassing. I'm sorry they saw me like this, though, Asham said.
Lift your hands, I should refresh your bandages.
Sitting up and grimacing through it as Rue slowly unwound the fabric across Asham's chest. As the last bandage came off, Asham marveled at the blacks and blues that danced across his skin.
Could have been worse. Much worse, Rue said.
She must have held back, Asham conceded.
Maybe. Either way, you're lucky.
From a pouch nearby, Rue pulled out a fresh stretch of cloth. He opened a ceramic jar, and the pungent smell of ointment filled the air. With a small brush, he began applying the ointment to the bandage. No, we've established this. I am a fool, an embarrassed fool, Asham sighed. Rue, graciously, said nothing this time. Thank you. And sorry. You were right. I let my passions and my ego overtake my sense.
Lift,
Rue said in response. Asham winced as the cool ointment contacted bruised skin. I think I need to visit the other monasteries. Rue rolled his eyes.
Of course, your solution is to leave, he said.
No, not to run away this time. To expand my training. Kori Mountain has taught me much, but I clearly need to gain a broader perspective. A broader understanding of the world, and of the other clans. Rue gave a sharp tug on the bandages, and Asham grimaced as he sucked air in through his teeth.
So you admit it then? Rue said.
Asham frowned. Admit what?
That you joining the monastery was you running away.
Rue looked Asham in the eyes. Asham held his gaze. Yes, Asham finally answered. I don't think I could have admitted that to myself before today, he continued. I'm sorry it's taken me this long.
Because you're an embarrassed fool?
Rue replied.
We have established this, after all.
Asham smiled. You saved my life today.
2 days ago,
Rue interrupted. 2 days? Waymaster, help me. Asham shook his head in disbelief, then pressed on. You've always had my back. Even when I hid from my feelings, from my parents, from myself, you still supported me, helped me train on top of your own duties, your responsibilities to your family, the disruption of your own way, and I... Rue leaned in, kissing Asham. Soft, gentle. Surprise quickly melted into a warm happiness as Asham kissed him back. The two parted, looking at each other, the moment lingering before Rue broke the spell.
I should clean these bandages,
he said, standing with the old discarded ones.
We have to get you back into traveling shape if you're to continue your journey.
Asham sighed as Rue walked to the door. There, Rue paused.
I'll be here when you return,
he said, then left without looking back. Asham leaned back in the bed and sighed. The warm, familiar scent of the incense filled the room. Outside, high above, a sparrowhawk's cry pierced the overcast sky as it flew on across the lands of Tarkir. A special thanks to all of my patrons, especially Owen Griffin. Thanks for watching and for your continued support.